I live in a townhouse. What that means is that I have neighbors on the right. We have just a shared wall. I have neighbors on the left. We have a shared wall. I have a neighbor above us. We have a shared ceiling. And for the last several years in our house, Elul has become a time for the shofar. And the other thing that's kind of important to know about my house and the way that we operate is that we wake up, it's, Neil and I in my house, that we wake up in the morning and we get up, we eat yogurt, we take Mabel out to go potty, and then we get ready for the day, at which point we leave the house. And we don't often come back until, dinner, which means that prime shofar practicing hours are pre-7 a.m., and then maybe like a little after 7 p.m., which I have to imagine my neighbors love. They just love. And one of the things that we're going to talk about today when we learn a little bit about shofar, because it's actually so cool, is that one of the meanings of the shofar is that it's supposed to be an alarm clock. But I don't think it's supposed to be a literal alarm clock. So Neil, come on up here for just a second, because we're going to talk and learn about this amazing thing that we get to share on our high holidays, which is the call of the shofar. Hi. And only what I say when I say it. Okay, great. Just checking. Okay, so it's one of the things that we get to share. And Neil goes to our Jewish day school, where they blow shofar every morning of Elul. And they prepare themselves for this season and for this moment with the call of the shofar. They sound it. And it is, I can't tell if it's better or worse than the morning bell in your building. It's hard to say. But it's loud. And it brings great, feeling to our bodies. So let's talk for a second here. You come right here. And we're going to talk for a second about the blasts of the shofar and what they mean, because there's actually great meaning in exactly what sound we make and in exactly what order we make it. So our very first sound is called tekiah, and it sounds like this. Perfect. It is one sort of medium short sound. It's plain, it's a single. And one of the very coolest things about the tekiah is that in our rules of shofar blowing, every other sound has to be surrounded by a tekiah on the front and a tekiah on the back end. So you'll notice that whenever we do shofar calls, we do tekiah, something else, tekiah. So it's bookends. And it's almost like a call to attention. If you've ever, watched a Disney movie where there's like a trumpeter or whatever with a flag hanging off of it, they make one call, the king is coming or the whatever's coming, and it's a notice, it's an update that it's happening. And once we come to attention, also we hear that the tekiah is kind of like here we go, right? It's sort of a sound of excitement and joy. The next sound is called shivarim. It sounds like this. 3. Shivarim literally means brokenness. It's like a fracture. It's not that sound of great joy. It is a broken blow. As if it were whole, it would be a tekiah, but we've broken it into 3. It represents times of trouble or almost even like crying, right? It sounds like wails that come from our bodies when we're heartbroken. Our sages teach us that no one can make it through life without shivarim. We never live without a little bit of brokenness. And it's a call, maybe, to pay attention to those moments of brokenness in our own lives and in the lives of others. Our third sound is truah. One more time. Perfect. The Trua is 9 calls. It's the hardest one. I really can't really do it very well. Yes, I'm much worse than Neil. He would like you to know. At making shofar sounds. That is absolutely true. He's teaching me. And the Trua is like rapid fire, 9 calls, very quick, very close together. This is the one that most often gets compared to the alarm clock. And it's like sort of, right? It's like really staccato beats. And it teaches a lot of things. It also represents brokenness. It also represents that sort of crying feeling. The broken, right, beats remind us that there are spaces in between. But the other thing that I really like about this one is that the Trua also, it feels like running steps. And it maybe reminds us that progress is often measured in small steps rather than giant leaping steps. And then we have one more sound, which is the Tekiah Gedolah, which is the really, really big one. You will hear the 3 sounds, Tekiah, Shivarim, and Trua, sort of over and over again in our services. And the Tekiah Gedolah is sort of a final cap on the whole experience, one long concept, one long blast of that shofar that sums it all up. Thank you so much. No, you go stand. Love you. It's a good thing that we have so many guitar stands here at Temple Emanuel. Where else would we put our shofars? So we've got these essentially 4 sounds. The long tekiah at the beginning, but it's not that long. Shivarim, our broken, wailing sound. Trua, our quick staccato alarm clock sound. And Tekiah Gedolah, which is our just like in your guts sound, right? Like it goes and you take a minute and you get used to it. And then by the end of it, it like is reverberating in your body and you feel it all the way through. So here's a couple of things that I'm thinking about this year when I'm thinking about the role or the job or the way that we think about the shofar on these high holidays. Number 1, Rabbi Yitz Greenberg, Irving Greenberg, tells a story in a book that I really love, and I haven't seen it in any other place. When you think about the way that the shofar calls are arranged, we do a lot of tekiah, shivarim, trua, tekiah, done, right? And it's 3 lines. We'll do tekiah, we'll do a big tekiah, and then we'll do the broken ones, and then we finish and we move on. But when we have a big shofar section, you'll see that we do tekiah, shivarim, tekiah. Tekiah, teruah, tekiah in there. And so we surround them always bookended by those. And here's the story that Rabbi Yitz Greenberg teaches. He says that the tradition was that there was one straight sound that would come out of the shofar, and then there was one broken sound, and then there was one straight sound. And the straight sound represented honor, and the straight sound represented joy, and the broken sound represented brokenness, and then the straight sound brought us back to joy. And then, as our tradition teaches us and history tells us, there was a moment about 2,000 years ago when the world changed for the Jewish community because we stopped all living in one place. The Second Temple was destroyed in 70 CE, and the Jewish community scattered to all kinds of different places. Lots of things came out of that moment, many of them initially very, very hard, right? We had all been centered in Jerusalem. We'd had one central place and location, and even though life was far from ideal in that moment, being apart, our tradition teaches, was very hard. And then several hundred years later, after we had sort of scattered across the region, there began to be moments of reconnection, and people would come back together and they would find each other, and different communities would join each other. And when that happened, one of the things that they noticed is that over several hundred years, their traditions had evolved a little bit differently. We know all about that, right? It probably, if you have spent many of your high holidays, not maybe even in this zip code, but in a different synagogue, you will notice that our traditions have evolved quite differently. There are beautiful similarities and moments of connection where you feel in your guts that you recognize things, and there are moments that you don't recognize. This exact thing happened. Absolutely, in this moment, when the different communities started to come together, because we had one long sound, one broken sound, one long sound, and one group of people came back and theirs had sounded like one long sound, 3 broken notes and a long sound. And another community had come and they had one long sound, 9 faster broken notes, and then a long sound. What to do? Those are not the same. Shofar sounding is such an important, critical, in our guts moment of this time. So what were they going to do to handle that? Rabbi Abahu of Caesarea, around the year 300 CE, who was a very trusted decision maker in the community, said, what we do is keep the community together. We unite even in this moment of disagreement or different traditions. And so we do our shofar calls so that we have one set of each. One shivarim set, one truah set, and one that has shivarim and truah together. Both broken sounds in the same set of calls for the sake of community. It's one of these moments where we actually have a compromise that 2,000 years later we still carry. I can think of one other example in our tradition where we do that, which is with our mezuzah, which we hang on a diagonal. And one of the stories I've heard about that is that somebody said up and somebody said horizontal. And so we said, okay, we'll put it at an angle. And we do. For the sake of community. I don't really know if that's the reason, but I really love that teaching about it, because what's the lesson that we take from that, which is sometimes we do things differently and yet we get to be sometimes for compromise. It's not easy. But all of that still doesn't tell us what we're supposed to do with the sound of the shofar. When we hear it, when we are commanded to or called to listen to it, what do we do with that? So, I'll tell you a story. A long time ago, before there were like fire engines and smoke alarms and firemen and trucks that had hoses and fire hydrants and the whole system that we have to keep our world from catching on fire. And simultaneously, there were a lot of houses that were built from things that were just extra flammable. And so fire was a real problem. Most houses were built from wood or they had straw or whatever it was. And imagine, right, what it feels like outside. I just got the alert on my phone this morning that it's going to get warm for the next couple of days, elevated fire danger till Saturday. So imagine that we're living in a world where that's true, but where we don't have a system for dealing with the small moments of fire management. So when a fire would break out in a community, what would happen? Well, somebody would run across the town and tell everyone, and they'd go from house to house and business to business, and they'd throw up, their arms, and they'd yell fire, and they would tell people, and people would stop what they were doing, and they would rush to put out the fire. And some towns even had a watchtower with a guy that would look for fire. That was his job. And if he saw the fire, he would make a thing, right? He would make an announcement that there was a fire, and then people would be able to mobilize faster. And sometimes they would form like a human chain, right? And they would pass the buckets so that they didn't have to do. We can imagine this, right? That this is a way that one would put out a fire in a town like this. Well, it happened that there was once somebody who came from a very small town. And he was from a village, just a couple of people. And he came to the bigger town for the very first time. And he stopped at at some place in the town, and he was going to spend the night so that he didn't have to start moving again until daylight. And he was sitting at the inn and eating dinner, and all of a sudden he heard the sound of a bugle, right? Of a horn, and it was really loud. And everybody started rushing around inside the inn and started running toward the door. And so the kid asked the innkeeper, like, what's happening? What's this? Where is everybody going? What are we doing? And the innkeeper said, it's our system for knowing when we have a fire. And if there's a fire, we sound the bugle, and then the fire is pretty quickly put out. It's amazing, thought the young man, who had probably watched a number of buildings, right, catch on fire and burn down and have to be rebuilt in the course of his life. And he thought, what an amazing gift I will bring back to my community. And so the boy from the village stopped on his way out of the town when he had finished whatever it was he was doing there, and he bought a bugle. His little village should have a bugle too. And he returned to his little village, and he was so excited. He was so excited that he had a bugle, that he was going to save his people, his townspeople, from fire. And so he called all of the villagers together, and they all gathered around him, and they came, and they were, we don't really get called together all the time. He said to them, listen, I have to tell you something so exciting. We don't have to be afraid of fire anymore. Just watch me. Watch this. See how quickly the fire gets put out. And so saying this, he ran to the nearest hut and he set fire to the roof, which was made of straw. And the fire, as it always did, began to spread really quickly, as it always did. And the boy yelled, "Don't be alarmed. It's okay. Watch me." And so he pulled out his bugle, and he began to blow the bugle with all of his might, interrupting it only to catch his breath and to say, "Wait, this is how we put out the fire. I've got this, just wait." And he blew the bugle, and he blew the bugle, and he blew the bugle, but the fire didn't really seem to care about the sound of the bugle. And then it just spread. The bugle didn't put out the fire. People did. All that bugle did was tell them, remind them, alert them that they were needed, that their presence was needed, that they had to work together as a community and do something really important and do it really fast. Somebody asked me recently, what am I supposed to do when you give sermons and you call us to action and you try to mobilize and you give us this great rousing sermon and you tell us that we're supposed to, care about something, do something, have a calling, we heard, right? Listen to the call is what we heard yesterday. We give sermons all the time that are intended to make you want to do something. We're not subtle about it. We ask you directly to listen to us. We keep you hostage in this room until we're done talking. But we don't always tell you exactly what to do. We might tell you to listen. We might tell you to act. We might tell you to mobilize. We might tell you to hear and then do. And the question is, do what? Act how? Be called where? And I'll tell you, I can't tell you that. And the shofar can't awaken you to that. Only you know. And so we're in this high holiday season. We are in what I think has been a pretty crazy year. Globally, certainly here, we're in transition, we're in election season, we're at war, we're in a hurricane, we're in global warming, we're in, I don't know, the middle of life, and it's a lot, and life happens and fills us up and overflows, and sometimes we are just surrounded by, I don't know, at this moment, what it feels to me like chaos and a little bit of dissatisfaction, a lot of dissatisfaction with where our world is and what we're supposed to do with it. And I know that many of us feel not 100% sure what we're supposed to do to make it better. And the truth is, I don't know either. But I know that there are a lot of us. I know that each of us has hands and has big hearts, and that each of us has our own philanthropic capacities. I know that each of us has voices and voting capacities, many of us, and some of us will in a few years. I know that we have friends and family and neighbors who might need us. We probably have tuna fish at the back of our cabinet that could get donated to JFS so that a family could eat. We probably have the capacity to do a whole lot of little things all the time. But we also have the capacity to be changed and to be different and to be awoken to what the needs are around us. And the shofar, it turns out, as I have just learned but never seen it before, the shofar is a symbol of community. It's a symbol of compromise. It's a symbol of coming together to do the things that we need to do to make the world a little bit better. And it's told to us over and over, it's a wake-up call. Maimonides tells us that it is literally, he says, awake, you slumberers, from your sleep and rouse yourself from your lethargy. Are we sleeping? I don't know. Only you know where your heart is at and where your soul is at. All we can do is listen to the calls of the shofar and take this opportunity to be drawn to something that matters. Maybe it matters to you. Maybe it matters to all of us. Maybe that combination of shivarim and truah, right? That community coming together to just do both will live with you now, and you will hear a need in your own life for community, for compromise. But at the end of the day, the next step is yours. We're never going to stand up here and tell you what to do or who to vote for. At least I won't. We're never going to tell you what action to take or how to take it. We might give you suggestions. But our job and the job of the shofar is to awaken in you what already lives in you and to remind you that this is the moment. We need not wait until we are 120 and sure that this is the end to do good things in the world and to act better and do what's right and make the world more right. The shofar reminds us every single year what it means to show up, to wake up and show up. And so my blessing for you, my prayer for you and for all of us is that we live in a world where we don't need to be awoken because we haven't gone to sleep, because there is a lot to do. My prayer for us is that we hear from those around us or from our own guts what's needed. The calls, the cries are out there. They're everywhere. If we're listening. And if you needed an 8-year-old blowing a shofar to wake you up and remind you that you're needed, then here's your moment. Shana Tova.